I'm your local high school dropout, and it's day 5 as a gardener in this Garden Anywhere by Anyone video series. You'll notice we skipped day 4 yesterday. It was just raining all day. And then today I kind of figured a little apparatus to keep the camera and mic and everything out of the rain. So I actually suspended an umbrella and attached an umbrella to the camera stand so that it would keep it out of the rain. Quickly go over, we're just kind of still letting this compost berm sit, and being that it's rainy today, I wanted to touch a little bit on what I've talked about in some other videos. The first video where I talked about plugged in soil, and this is the reason why having plugged in soil is so important, is specifically on days like today when it rains. Every time it rains, the worms come out, and all worms have a sort of mucus that they cover in that gets soil and everything all over it. So as they come out and they're finding other little places, they're transferring microbials, all kinds of things. And why it's so important to have that plugged in is there's actually some information that's transferred along with that. There's some theories that talk about how mycelium actually helps all the ground communicate. And if you think, if we're just growing only in a pot, if I had a pot here and it was completely isolated from the soil here, there wouldn't be a lot of exchange. It's kind of the difference between having a book versus like the internet, right? You know, as far as information, and for good and bad. You know, the internet, we can also get bad information, and this is another thing with Earth Community Garden. While we really emphasize the earth part, is sometimes people think that they can contaminate or poison soil in another place and it won't affect the soil that they would normally go to. But there's always exchange, there's always some exchange of information there, and toxins and those types of things go everywhere. And really quickly wanted to show something. When the property management had asked that the garden bed be moved off common area, one thing that we wanted to do, as we're coming and using this for a demonstration garden, is at least make sure it was in close enough proximity to plugged in or live soil. And so we left a little bit of a gap right here. So if days like today are perfect, when it rains, the worms can kind of migrate, come up into here, into our compost berm, and really help, again, with the worm's membrane being covered in all kinds of microbial things. But it's not just worms. I mean, you have spiders, centipedes, millipedes, all these bugs that are actually constantly transferring, and even flies. So flies will even transfer different microbials from place to place as they go. And that is all a source of information for the soil and a source of information for the garden itself. And you know, there is a lot of research being done with mushrooms, fungi, and mycelium, talking about how there is much more exchange that takes place with those than we had first previously thought. So that is the exact reason why you want, even if you're growing in a box or a planter box, at least having some sort of way that it can connect, so to speak, with the network and the plugged in soil with the rest. And if we look at this plugged in soil,
even if the grounds of this complex were isolated, it's still 100 times bigger than this 5-foot by 12-foot demonstration garden bed. That means more than 100 times exposure to plants, different species, microbial diversity, and soil variances, and 100 times more data points this garden bed would have than if it were completely isolated. It's not metaphysical or esoteric, it's simple mathematics, even for your local high school dropout.
You know, a desert might have this spot over here that can sustain life and live soil, and a spot over here that can sustain life and soil. And the whole place in between may be completely dead, completely dry, and not conducive to transferring information, because water is one of those main sources that kind of connect, you know, two spots apart. So even if this were miles and miles apart, but with rain, you will actually see worms that will kind of crawl, and they'll migrate, you know, from one spot to the other spot following rain clouds. And that's how, you know, worms are pretty much found everywhere, is just they're able to follow paths of water so that they don't dry out.
Now time to get to work.
so I'm going to spend my hour today just continuing to go through and chop up everything, and we don't really want to dig about it and disturb it too much. So when I come through, I'm just going to look for things sticking up and chop it. It's maybe a little mundane and a little unnecessary, but I'm dedicating an hour a day to this demonstration garden bed for the Grow Anywhere by Anyone video series. And I figured what better thing to do in the rain than to just start chopping through.
I'm cutting up the loose leaves that were on top of the compost berm with garden scissors and letting the pieces drop to soak in the rain puddles.
I wanted to quickly show the difference between these two. So this is almost completely black, which means that it's decomposing almost all around. This is beginning to start to decompose. But when compost is fully decomposed, it's black and odorless. And this is what we're trying to go for. This was a little bit deeper in the compost pile, whereas this was kind of laying on top, so of course dried out a little better. The compost pile is really starting to look good. The wood is getting soft and wet, a little slimy, which is kind of what you're looking for when things are starting to decompose. But just want to show you those two examples.
I'm going to run out the clock today by cutting the organic matter in our compost berm into small pieces. Then try to even out the berm so it's consistent in mass and volume all along the east border. Last thing I'm going to do for today is sweep up the wet pieces I freshly cut. It is proving to be a little difficult as the wet pieces are sticking to the wet concrete. And now I'm finished with day 5 in this Garden Anywhere by Anyone series. I'm your local high school dropout. Thank you to Reframe Events for supplying us with the organic matter and sponsoring this demonstration garden, and the residents who are letting us use this as a demonstration garden bed. Earth Community Garden and Food Pantry for sponsoring the content of this Garden Anywhere by Anyone video series. We offer free organic sustainable gardening classes to groups and organizations. More info can be found at www.communitygarden.farm. And the Utah Hidden Garden Tour. Tickets for their 2024 garden tour are on sale now at www.hiddengarden.org.